Welcome to the H2H Human Connection Done Right Summit, bringing together forward-thinking leaders who understand that true innovation happens when people, process, and technology work in harmony. Lean into this refreshing, energizing experience designed to inspire you with a new approach to a timeless principle. Our speakers will offer fresh insights that will challenge perspectives and spark new ideas.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. Today, I'm going to talk about why empathy is the key to performance and growth. My name is Matt Stoyka, and I'm very, very pleased to present this topic. We're at an incredibly interesting inflection point in how we do business. What it means to be a leader is changing every day. The rise of AI is threatening to completely upend how humans work. So what's the future of leadership? Well, that's easy. It's empathy. So what is empathy? Let me start by sharing a little story. A few years ago, I was given the opportunity to lead a brand new company that resulted from the merger of 6 different existing companies. As you can imagine, this unification required an inordinate amount of work. There were processes to harmonize, hundreds of disparate tools to evaluate, and we had to ensure clients experienced zero disruption. But most importantly, the leadership team agreed unanimously that before anything, we needed to set the foundation for a culture where our employees could thrive. We started by establishing and defining core values. Now, an organization's core values are an established set of guiding principles that authentically define how your company and its people operate, behave, and interact daily. My favorite way to describe the function of a company's core values is simple. They define how a company and its people show up for their clients, their partners, their community, and each other. Now, as a leader, it's not my job to select the values and order them to be implemented. Let your teams determine the North Stars that will guide you. However, it was my job and is my job as a leader to uphold and live these pillars. Simply establishing or defining a set of core values is the first step. A company's culture truly comes to life when the core values are ingrained, embedded, and at the heart of every decision made by every employee. Now, as I mentioned, this particular company was the unification of 6 companies, each with its principles and value systems. How do we capture the essence of these 6 legacy companies and distill it into who we wanted to become? We asked our employees. We looked at each of the different legacy companies to evaluate each company's values, understand their priorities, and determine where there was alignment and commonality. As we examined each company's culture and differentiating features, our core values almost came to life on their own. We landed on 5 defining values and wove them into the fabric of our company. They were a part of everyday nomenclature. We formulated our recognition program around them and even based our flagship company award on how an individual lives these core values. We recognized the values driving the results. Interestingly, there was one particular core value that employees rallied around and quickly became embedded throughout all levers and departments of the organization. That particular value, you guessed it, empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand someone at a deep level and share their feelings. It's about putting yourself in someone else's position, recognizing their emotions, and responding in a way that fosters trust and communication. Empathy is not compassion and it's not sympathy. It doesn't mean just being nice or agreeable. It's not about avoiding hard conversation, and it's not about letting emotions override strategic decision making. Empathy is a key leadership skill that, when applied, will allow you to better understand, motivate, collaborate, teach, and lead others. When applied in practice, empathy will be your superpower. That leads to personal and professional growth. Now, why is empathy important? It strengthens relationships, creating deeper connections with managers, employees, peers, teams, customers, partners, you name it. It fosters a culture of collaboration, which leads to increased innovation and problem solving. Empathy enhances adaptability, helping leaders and teams navigate change more effectively. The bottom line is that empathy helps you achieve more while doing so in a meaningful and rewarding way. Now, how am I so sure about this? I spent the last year researching this and writing a book on this topic. I've also spent my 25-year career developing it into a personal core value and blueprint for success. I'd like to share some really interesting findings from my research on this topic. A common misconception about empathy is that you're either empathetic or you're not. Well, in actuality, empathy is a spectrum like most things. Thankfully, according to the research by the American Psychological Association, it's also a skill you can learn. Workers are now desiring deeper connections, radical flexibility, and a shared purpose in their professional lives, moving away from the old norms toward a culture that prizes holistic well-being and growth. An EY report on empathy in business underscores the critical role of empathetic leadership. Nearly 80% of respondents agree that empathy significantly reduces their likelihood of leaving their jobs. Moreover, the report highlights that empathetic leadership enhances efficiency, creativity, and innovation, with a notable 87% of employees believing that empathy contributes to better leadership and performance. A formal study from Harvard Business Review found that empathetic companies outperform their less empathetic competitors by 20%. Empathetic leadership allows for better understanding and responsiveness to the needs and concerns of employees, especially in the wake of organizational change. Catalyst Inc., which is a nonprofit dedicated to workplace inclusion, conducted a study that found a strong correlation between empathy and productivity. The research confirms what I've long experienced. Employees are more engaged, innovative, and productive when empathy is at the core of their workplace experience. As the study author Tara Van Bommel explains, our findings demonstrate that not only is empathy an effective business strategy, it's a strategic imperative to respond to crisis and transformation, and a critical ingredient for building inclusive workplaces where everyone can belong, contribute, and thrive. Okay, so when it comes to sales and marketing, the question is, how can empathy help? Well, I think we can all agree that being in marketing and sales is hard. Sales is no longer just about persuasion. It's about caring about your prospect or customer's problems more than they do. Empathetic sellers listen carefully and deeply, identify unspoken concerns and objections, and tailor solutions that they believe will exceed their customers' expectations. Long gone is the transactional approach, which may get you a quick win, but it's never going to result in a long-term customer loyalty. I'd like to share a story about winning with empathy. Earlier in my career, when I was asked to lead a sales team for the very first time, I was overwhelmed to say the least. But as I dug in, I quickly learned that the team was missing a process-centric approach. Since I didn't know what I didn't know, I reached out to colleagues and friends who I considered to be great salespeople. And by applying curiosity and empathy, I learned something very special. Each great salesperson I met had a defined process. While they might not be able to draw a process flow diagram, they followed a process nonetheless. They were disciplined in their approach. But what wasn't quite as apparent was how they used and owned the skill of empathy to build meaningful and lasting relationships. It was truly the combination of process and empathy that made them great. The technology, that was the icing on the cake. We turned around an underperforming sales organization that within 2 years was doing 200% of the original quota with a team that was half the size it had been originally. But where the story really gets interesting for me was how this lesson led me to starting and selling a very successful technology services company. I decided to help others implement a process-first, technology-second approach, but one that was deeply rooted in an empathetic-driven culture. I named my company Relation Edge because I wanted relationships to be at the heart of everything we did and how we showed up. This led to the development of really meaningful relationships that in turn led to happy clients that were engaged, vulnerable, and loyal. It made us a highly attractive destination for talent. And in the end, we had built something special that we could all be proud of because empathy was our first priority. The best example of this was the incredibly deep relationships we formed with the software provider and their account executives. We took our responsibility as being a great partner very seriously. Ultimately, we knew just as much, if not more than they did, about what was important to them, and we used that to grow our business while helping them succeed. We understood their goals, metrics, and positioning. We figured out where they struggled and why, and we responded by helping them win. And in turn, we won a lot. Yes, the technology we deployed was world class, but the real story was the culture of empathy. All right, speaking of technology, and since this event recognizes the importance of people, process, and technology, I'm going to pivot to our latest obsession, AI. There is an interesting paradox that is coming. With the rise of AI, the need for human connection is increasing. Well, AI is going to dramatically change how we work, what work we do, and how effective we become. It's my opinion that AI is not going to replace leaders, but rather it will change how leaders lead. And make no mistake, AI is going to disrupt how we work. It's reminiscent of the launch of the internet, mobile devices, and cloud computing all combined. Employees must shift from being employees to being the CEOs of their responsibilities, owning their work and using AI as an enabler. Think of it as surrounding yourself with incredible mentors and experts that have limitless availability. The skill of leadership will be in greater and greater demand, which means employing empathy as part of your skill set isn't just important, it's required. Now, ironically enough, interacting with AI requires a deep sense of self, or as I like to say, self-empathy. To utilize the tools that exist today and to train them to be more and more helpful, you must have a deep understanding of what you want to accomplish using AI. Without it, you won't see the benefits. I've been working with several experts in AI the past year, and what I can share with you is that the results that AI can provide are only as good as your curiosity. And the good news is that by being curious, you are being empathetic. So when you decide to use AI, the query is what is so important. Taking the time to think and reflect on what a client's needs are is the key. This reflection and curiosity form the basis of empathy. I had a good reminder of this lesson recently. I was asked by a potential client to provide an advisory services proposal specific to their industry and business. I'd scheduled time to work on the proposal, 3 hours to be exact. I wanted the proposal to be perfect. What was interesting was how I applied empathy leading up to sitting down to draft the document. I was constantly thinking about what my prospective client is going through, what they're experiencing, what they aspire to be, and ultimately how I could lend my experience to them. By the time I sat down to write, I pretty much knew how I wanted it to turn out. So when I sat down, I decided to see if AI could help me get my thoughts down. And instead of writing the proposal, I spent the first 15 minutes collecting my thoughts and preparing a very detailed query for the AI agent to respond to. I must have rewritten it 5 times. The result, a completely formatted document that was 98% exactly what I wanted, produced in seconds. And with a few quick edits, I was able to complete the proposal in total time 30 minutes instead of the 3 hours I had planned for. This is one of the countless examples of how AI will make each of us more effective, but without a deep understanding of what we strive to achieve, it won't matter. To close on AI, as technology handles more and more, human connection will matter even more because relationships, trust, and deep understanding can't be automated. All right, so let's pivot now to a question I hear a lot. If empathy is so easy, why isn't everyone doing it? Throughout my career, I've identified several attitudes, behaviors, organizational cultures, and even societal norms that hinder empathetic leadership. I've observed countless bad leaders and hundreds of ineffective ones. As a lifelong learner and observer, I saw the same qualities underlying different workplace issues and challenges. As part of the research, we identified 6 characteristics that inhibited or prevented people from being empathetic. We named these the enemies of empathy. And the research and my own personal experience shows that companies that allow these enemies to exist experience poor performance, missed goals, high attrition, and a very, very weak culture. The important thing to remember is that these qualities are only detrimental to a workplace if left unchecked. As a leader, you want to unlock the full potential of your teams. These enemies limit your performance. By combating them, you can transform your organization into one that is more resilient, innovative, and prepared for the challenges of a complex business environment. The enemies we identified are ego, ambition, intolerance, the know-it-all, entitlement, and apathy. Today, we're only going to touch on one, ambition. Listen, I'm ambitious. Most people close to me can attest to this being one of my greatest strengths. It's led me to pursue and achieve great accomplishments and push myself beyond any perceived limitations. I've started and sold companies and achieved what is perceived to be success. Ambition is the desire and motivation to continuously achieve increasingly difficult goals. It can be the spark inside you that compels you, excuse me, to try your best at everything you do. So why, you may be asking, is ambition in the context of being an enemy of empathy? Because it is also perhaps one of my worst qualities and has caused detrimental effects on my physical and mental health and relationships. Ambition is a unique enemy of empathy in that it rears its ugly head in many ways, creating many downstream effects. Examples of ambition look different for each person, as everyone's markers for daunting yet fulfilling is unique. The problem is that if you're ambitious professionally, you tend to make decisions without considering the consequences first. As a result, you can get stuck dealing with those ramifications, which can create many problems. And I know this from experience. After selling my last company, I dove straight into a leadership role at the acquiring company, which ended amid the pandemic, which, needless to say, was an extremely stressful and trying time for everyone. Instead of taking a much needed break to spend time with my family and recharge, I did the exact opposite and took a CEO role that required the entirety of my attention for the next 3 years. Without going into too much detail, this decision affected my health, both physically and mentally, and my relationships. A good friend recently asked me why I would do that when I could just lay by the pool all day and enjoy the fruits of my labor. Why would I turn down the chance to recharge and focus on my family, an opportunity that most people never get to have, and instead choose another 24/7 by 365 role? My ambition was showing up. I wanted to prove to myself and the world that my previous successes weren't flukes. I wanted to show that I could turn nothing into something incredible, not once, but twice. Reflecting on this now, I can see in myself what others easily recognize. But at the time, I only began to suffer from the impact. Ambition appears for me through the excess need to achieve. But there are many other warning signs that may manifest when a leader's ambition has reached damaging levels. Many leaders and sales professionals fall into the trap of ambition without awareness, pushing forward without listening, misreading signals, and ultimately hurting their own success. The sole focus is on winning or closing the deal or making quota or going to President's Club. The Center for Creative Leadership has found that leaders who don't handle their ambition properly can damage their careers and undercut organizational success. Excessive ambition is linked to showing poor follow-through and making poor strategic decisions, having difficult interpersonal relationships, and losing the trust of others. Earlier in my presentation, I emphasized the need to care about the client's problems more than they do. And what I meant by that is apply empathy, fight back ambition, and ultimately create meaningful, lasting, and productive relationships with your customers. Sellers need to shift their mindset from trying to control everything to being strategists, catalysts, and advisors, knowing when to lead, when to pass, and when to step back. Ambition without empathy is an enemy of your success. What we need is a shift in leadership with empathy as the differentiator. The best leaders and sellers in the future will be those who balance ambition with empathy. To do this, consider employing curiosity. Having a genuine interest leads to unique solutions. Employ active listening, recognizing signals and adjusting accordingly. Have a relationship-first mindset. Trust before transaction. And strategic facilitation. Being the point guard, not just the quarterback, and knowing when to guide versus when to let the team shine. Ambition with empathy helps you achieve your goals in the right way for the right reasons. Preparing to release a book has been a fascinating and humbling learning experience for me, and I'd like to share the key takeaways here as we wrap up. First, empathy is no longer a nice-to-have leadership quality. It is a strategic imperative. Second, businesses that embed empathy into their culture thrive because they cultivate trust, engagement, and innovation. Third, leaders who embrace empathy don't just react to challenges, they anticipate them by understanding their team's needs, fears, and aspirations. And finally, empathy directly impacts metrics that matter: employee retention, customer satisfaction, and financial performance. In fact, a recent EY study found that companies with highly engaged employees outperform their competitors by 147% in earnings per share. That level of engagement starts with and ends with empathetic leadership. Remember that empathy is not just a leadership skill, it's a life skill. In prioritizing it, you'll not only transform your performance, but also leave a legacy of deep human connection, understanding, and impact. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the talk.
Thank you for joining us in today's forward-thinking session of Human Connection Done Right. As we transition to our next expert speaker, remember that together we are redefining the future. To stay engaged and informed, visit revenue-bydesign.com, where together we will be deliberate, be intentional, and be successful.